What if Robb Stark learned the truth and declared for Jon Snow? Let's explore the depth of it in the video. Robb Stark is sitting in his war tent, illuminated by the flickering light of a single candle, a storm raging outside mirroring the turmoil. Within him, he clenches the parchment in his fist, the wax seal of Winterfell broken and discarded, the words within branded onto his mind. This isn't just another battle report, another plea for supplies, or even news of Sansa's plight. This is something far more profound, something that strikes at the very foundation of everything he believes. It's a letter from his father, Eddard Stark, written mere days before his capture in King's Landing. And the words, they are almost unbelievable. Robb rereads them, each syllable a hammer blow against his composure. The letter speaks of treason, of a viper's nest in the heart of the Red Keep, and a truth so shattering it threatens to unravel the entire realm. He recounts how he went to King's Landing, believing King Robert and following his law, finding out that the Lannisters did not want him there or his ideas, realizing that he had to dig into the rumors being spread, and the truth was far worse. He warns Robb of the Lannister children, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. They are not, he states plainly, the true-born heirs of Robert Baratheon. They are products of incest, born of the forbidden union between Cersei and her twin brother, Jaime Lannister. Bastards born of incest, seated on the Iron Throne. Robb runs a hand through his hair, his breath catching in his throat. Incest is a taboo, a stain upon a house's honor, a sin against gods and men. But to learn that the children he considered enemies, the pretenders to the throne he was fighting against, were born of such a union. It's almost too much to bear. And the timing? Ned Stark discovered this truth just before Robert's death. Had he lived, would Robert have acted? Would he have torn down his own house, his own legacy, to cleanse the realm of this corruption? Or would he have turned a blind eye, clinging to the lie to preserve the peace? But the revelation doesn't end there. Ned's letter continues, delving into a secret even more closely guarded, a truth hidden for years to protect a life, a truth that now, in these desperate times, must be revealed. The letter speaks of Lyanna Stark, Robb's aunt, and Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince who sparked Robert's rebellion. The official story, the story Robb grew up with, was that Rhaegar kidnapped and raped Lyanna, triggering a war that cost thousands of lives and ended the Targaryen dynasty. But Ned's letter paints a different picture, a far more complex and tragic one. Ned claims that Lyanna was not abducted, but loved by Rhaegar, and that he was not taken, he was with them willingly, that they ran away together to protect their family and eventually wed in secret, a secret wedding, far away from the Iron Throne and King Robert's law. It continues, he further notes that Rhaegar was not some brutal barbarian or cruel overlord, but a man he could call his kin. That while his actions did result in a war, he knows that he did not force her into this, that Robert was not ready to take responsibility for his realm, but to kill every dragon possible. This meant not only Rhaegar and his family, but the woman he wed, and from this union a child was born. Not a bastard born of rape, but a true-born Targaryen heir, the last male descendant of the Dragon Kings. And who is this child? The letter reveals that it is none other than Jon Snow. Robb practically recoils from the parchment, his mind reeling. Jon, his brother, the bastard he grew up with, the quiet, honorable boy he always admired, a Targaryen prince. It seems impossible. Absurd. For years, Robb had believed Jon to be the son of his father and some unknown woman, a stain upon Ned Stark's otherwise unblemished honor. But now he learns that the truth was far more complicated, far more dangerous, that Ned Stark, the most honorable man Robb knew, had carried this secret for years, protecting Jon from Robert's wrath, from the inevitable execution that would have befallen any surviving Targaryen. The letter explains that Ned claimed Jon as his bastard, to protect him, to hide him in plain sight, knowing that Robert would never suspect the true heir to the Iron Throne was growing up in Winterfell, under his very nose, that he asked his wife to call him her child and to never mistreat him, promising that he would explain it to her when he returned, promising that he would reveal the truth about Jon Snow to his son when he returns. The music becomes more somber, reflecting Robb's internal struggle. Robb tries to piece it all together. The Lannister children born of incest, Joffrey a cruel and sadistic impostor, Myrcella and Tommen innocent pawns in a deadly game, and Jon, not a bastard, but a prince, a Targaryen, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, if Ned Stark's words are to be believed. It's a complete upheaval of everything he thought he knew about the war, about his family, about the very history of Westeros. He thinks of Jon, his quiet dignity, his unwavering sense of honor, his natural leadership. Could Jon truly be a Targaryen? Could he possess the blood of the dragon, the fire and the ruthlessness that were said to characterize the Dragon Kings? Or would he be more like Lyanna, his grandmother, gentle, kind, but with a hidden strength, a fierce protectiveness of those she loved? Robb stands abruptly, pacing the confines of his tent. If this is true, it changes everything. The war is no longer about avenging his father, about freeing Sansa and Arya, about securing the North's independence. It becomes something far larger, something that could reshape the entire realm. But it also adds another layer of complexity, another burden to his already heavy shoulders. He is already fighting a war he may not be able to win. Declaring for Jon would mean alienating potential allies like Stannis Baratheon, who considers himself the rightful heir. It would mean facing the combined might of the Lannisters and potentially the rest of the realm, united against what they would undoubtedly see as a Targaryen pretender. He stops pacing, staring at the candle flame, his face etched with doubt and confusion. And what of Jon himself? Would he even want the Iron Throne? He had always seemed content with his lot, resigned to a life of duty and service, first in Winterfell and then, presumably, at the Wall. Would he be willing to abandon that life, to embrace his Targaryen heritage, to fight for a throne he never asked for? And could Robb, a young man thrust into leadership by circumstance, truly place the weight of a kingdom on his brother's shoulders? Robb picks up the letter again, his fingers tracing the familiar handwriting. Of his father, he trusts his father implicitly. Ned Stark was a man of unwavering honor, a man who always did what was right, regardless of the cost. He would not lie, not about something like this. And yet, it's so difficult to believe. Could his father have been deceived? Could there be another explanation? A sudden gust of wind shakes the tent, momentarily extinguishing the candle flame. Robb is plunged into darkness for a beat before relighting it. No, he knows his father. He knows the weight of his words. He knows the depth of his honor. If Ned Stark says Jon is a Targaryen, then he is. The question now is, what to do with this knowledge? How to navigate this treacherous new landscape, this war within a war? How to honor his father's wishes while protecting his family, his people, and the North? Robb takes a deep breath, a newfound resolve hardening his features. One thing is certain, this changes everything. He can no longer fight for a simple victory, for vengeance, or for independence. He must now fight for the future of the realm, for the restoration of justice, and for the rightful king, whoever that may be. And if Jon Snow is indeed the key to that future, then Robb Stark will stand by his side, no matter the cost. The North will stand by his side. They have faced winter, and they shall face the White Walkers and their army of dead. The Starks will stand tall with Jon Snow. The question now is what must be done. Robb stands before a gathered assembly of northern lords and Riverlander nobles in the great hall of River Run. Banners of Stark, Tully, and unexpectedly, a newly crafted banner bearing a white direwolf superimposed upon a three-headed dragon hang side by side. The air crackles with nervous anticipation, confusion, and a healthy dose of northern suspicion. Think about this. Robb Stark, fresh from battlefield victories and fueled by the devastating news of his father's execution, now faces a choice that could either solidify his power or shatter his fledgling kingdom. How far would Robb Stark go to avenge his father? And what if that involved putting aside his own ambition for a greater cause? What if avenging Ned Stark and the North meant embracing a Targaryen, and specifically declaring Jon Snow as the rightful heir to the Iron Throne? This isn't just about vengeance anymore, folks. This is about legitimacy, about challenging the very foundation upon which the Lannisters have built their tyrannical reign. The stakes? Nothing less than the fate of Westeros. Let's dive in, shall we? Robb, his face a mask of grim determination, surveys the room. Catelyn Tully stands at his side, her expression a mix of grief, apprehension, and a mother's protective instinct. Great Jon Umber, fearsome as ever, leans on his massive greatsword, his eyes narrowed in scrutiny. Lords Karstark, Mormont, Glover, the stalwarts of the North, stand shoulder to shoulder, their fealty unwavering. But among the Riverlanders, Edmure Tully shifts uneasily, while the Blackfish, Brynden Tully, watches with a calculating gaze. Their loyalty is more conditional, more tied to the immediate safety and prosperity of their lands. My lords, Robbie begins, his voice ringing with authority. We stand at a crossroads. The Lannisters have shown their true colors. They murdered my father, a man known for his honor and integrity, a man who would never speak falsely. He spoke the truth, even to his death. A murmur ripples through the hall. Ned Stark's name hangs heavy in the air, a reminder of the sacrifice he made and the injustice he suffered. Before his death, Robb continues, his voice rising with emotion, my father sent a message that shatters everything we thought. We knew about the Iron Throne, about the Baratheons, about the very fabric of this realm. He pauses for dramatic effect, allowing his words to sink in. Catelyn places a comforting hand on his arm, but Robb gently shakes it off. He needs to do this. He owes it to his father. My father, Robb declares, his voice resonating with conviction, revealed the truth about Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen Baratheon. They are not Robert Baratheon's children. They are born of incest, the product of a vile union between Cersei and Jaime Lannister. They have no right to the Iron Throne. A collective gasp fills the hall. The implications of Robb's words are staggering. The entire Baratheon claim is built on a lie, a foundation of deceit and treachery. This throws the succession into chaos, Robb continues, seizing the moment. Stannis and Renly Baratheon both claim the throne, but neither is worthy. They fight amongst themselves while the Lannisters bleed the realm dry. But there is another, a rightful heir, one whose claim is stronger than any Baratheon, one whose blood flows with the fire of dragons. He gestures towards the newly crafted banner. All eyes follow. Confusion gives way to dawning realization. My father, Robb announces, his voice booming. Through the hall, kept a secret to protect him from Robert Baratheon, a secret about my brother Jon Snow. Jon is not my bastard brother. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. He is Aegon Targaryen, the sixth of his name, the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. Silence, absolute silence. The lords and nobles stare at Robb, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and outright skepticism. This is too much, too sudden. A bastard boy raised in Winterfell, now a Targaryen king. It's madness. Lord Karstark, never one to mince words, is the first to speak. A Targaryen? You would have us kneel to a Targaryen, Robb Stark? After what they did to our fathers? after the Mad King burned your grandfather alive? Aye! Echoes great Jon Umber, his voice a thunderous roar. I followed you, Robb, because you're a Stark, a son of the North. I'll not bend the knee to a dragon. The Riverlanders remain silent, their faces unreadable. Catelyn watches her son with growing concern. She understands the logic behind his decision, but she fears the consequences. Robb raises his hands, silencing the uproar. I understand your doubts, he says, his voice calm and reasoned. I understand your anger, but consider this. The Mad King is dead. Jon Snow is not his father. He is a Stark, raised in the North, with the blood of the dragon in his veins. He is honorable, just, and courageous. He is everything Joffrey Baratheon is not. And what proof do we have of this? Demands Lord Glover, his voice sharp. A letter from your father, after he was imprisoned and tortured by the Lannisters? How do we know he wasn't coerced? Robb meets Glover's gaze unflinchingly. My father was a man of honor, he says, his voice firm. He would never lie, not even under torture. I believe him, I trust him, and I ask you to trust me. He turns to Catelyn, seeking her support. She hesitates for a moment, then nods slowly. Eddard Stark was my husband, she says, her voice filled with emotion. I knew him better than anyone. He was a man of unwavering integrity. If he said Jon is a Targaryen, then I believe him. Catelyn's endorsement carries weight, particularly among the Riverlanders, but the Northern Lords remain unconvinced. Even if this is true, Lord Mormont argues, why should we support a Targaryen king? We declared ourselves independent. We crowned you, Robb Stark, king in the North. And I am grateful for your loyalty, Robb replies, his voice sincere. But I am not a king by right. I am a king by necessity, a king chosen to avenge my father and protect the North. But Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, is the rightful heir. By supporting him, we are not abandoning our independence. We are securing it. We are fighting for a just cause, for a realm free from Lannister tyranny. He pauses, allowing his words to sink in. Furthermore, Robb continues, his voice gaining strength, consider the alliances we could forge with a Targaryen king. Dorne, who still remembers the fall of the Targaryens, could be our allies. Perhaps even Daenerys Targaryen, across the narrow sea, could be persuaded to join our cause. Together, we could break the Lannisters and build a better Westeros. Robb looks around the hall, meeting the gaze of each lord and noble. I know this is a difficult decision, he says, his voice pleading, but I believe in Jon Snow. I believe he is the king Westeros needs. I believe he can unite the realm and bring peace and prosperity to our lands. I ask you, my lords, to put aside your doubts, to put aside your prejudices, and to join me in supporting Aegon Targaryen, the sixth of his name, King of the Seven Kingdoms. He waits, his breath held, for their response. The silence stretches, taut and agonizing. Then, slowly, hesitantly, Lord Mormont steps forward. The old bear always said Jon was a good lad, he says, his voice gruff. If he's got the blood of the dragon in him, and he's still as honorable as my brother Corrin always said, then I'll follow him. He kneels, placing his hand on the hilt of his sword. Aegon Targaryen, I pledge you my fealty. Great Jon Umber hesitates. For a moment, then lets out a thunderous laugh. Damn it all, he roars. If Mormont's kneeling, I'm kneeling too. I swore an oath to House Stark, and if you say this Targaryen is worthy, Robb, then I'll follow him to the ends of the earth. He drops to one knee, his massive frame shaking the floor. Aegon Targaryen, king in the north. One by one, the northern lords follow suit. Karstark, Glover, all of them grudgingly but resolutely pledging their allegiance to the newly revealed Targaryen king. The Riverlanders, seeing the North united, begin to follow as well. Edmure Tully, after a brief glance at his mother, kneels before Robb. King Robb, he says, his voice uncertain. "I support your decision. Aegon Targaryen, I pledge you my service." The Blackfish remains standing, his expression impassive. But when Robb meets his gaze, Brynden Tully nods slowly. "I will serve where I am needed," he says, his voice low. "But I will not pledge fealty to any king." Robb nods in understanding. Brynden Tully is a pragmatist, a soldier first and foremost. His loyalty is to Riverrun, not to any throne. With the North and the Riverlands united, Robb turns to the task of informing Jon Snow. A raven is dispatched to the Wall, carrying the momentous news that will change Jon's life forever. But the declaration of Jon Snow as king does not come without consequences. The other claimants to the Iron Throne, Stannis and Renly Baratheon, immediately denounce Robb's actions as treason. They see Jon as a pretender, a bastard boy raised to challenge their rightful claims. Any hope of an alliance with either Baratheon is now gone. Stannis, fueled by his unwavering belief in his own destiny, condemns Jon as an abomination, a product of incestuous Targaryen madness. He sees the resurgence of the Dragon Banner as a threat to the natural order, a sign of the chaos to come. Renly, ever the pragmatist, dismisses Jon as a convenient pawn in Robb's power grab. He sees the declaration as a desperate attempt by the North to gain leverage in the war, a cynical manipulation of Targaryen blood to further their own ambitions. With the Baratheons hostile, Robb and Jon are forced to rely on their own resources. The North and the Riverlands are strong, but they are not enough to defeat the Lannisters and the Baratheons alone. They need allies. Dorne, still smarting from the murder of Elia Martell and her children during the sack of King's Landing, sees an opportunity for revenge. Prince Doran Martell dispatches his brother, Oberyn, the Red Viper, to Riverrun to assess the situation and negotiate a potential alliance. Oberyn, ever the opportunist, is intrigued by the prospect of a Targaryen king and the chaos it could unleash upon the realm. However, securing Dorne's support comes at a price. The Martells demand justice for Elia and her children, and they expect Jon to publicly acknowledge the injustice done to them. Furthermore, they seek a marriage alliance between Jon and Arianne Martell, solidifying the bond between the two houses. The declaration of Jon Snow as king also creates internal divisions within the North and the Riverlands. Some lords, particularly those with long-standing grievances against the Targaryens, remain skeptical of Jon's legitimacy and question Robb's judgment. Others fear the wrath of the Lannisters and the Baratheons, and worry that supporting a Targaryen king will only prolong the war and bring further destruction to their lands. Catelyn Tully, while supportive of Robb's decision, harbors deep reservations about placing a Targaryen on the Iron Throne. She remembers the Mad King, the burning of her father and brother, and the years of war and suffering that followed. She fears that Jon, despite his Stark upbringing, will inherit the Targaryen madness and bring ruin upon the realm. Despite the challenges and the risks, Robb remains steadfast in his conviction that Jon Snow is the right choice for Westeros. He believes that Jon's Stark honor and Targaryen fire make him uniquely qualified to unite the realm and bring peace to the Seven Kingdoms. But convincing the rest of Westeros, and even his own allies, will be the greatest battle he has ever faced. The White Dragon has risen, folks, but whether it will soar to victory or be consumed by the flames of war remains to be seen. The political landscape has shifted dramatically. Alliances are forged and broken, loyalties are tested, and the fate of Westeros hangs in the balance. But what happens next when Daenerys comes? That's where things get really interesting. With Dorne now tentatively aligned, Jon Snow, the White Dragon, found himself navigating the treacherous currents of Westerosi politics. His claim, bolstered by Robb's unwavering support and Ned Stark's undeniable integrity, still felt precarious. He needed more than just the north and the Riverlands if he truly hoped to secure the Iron Throne and bring lasting peace to the realm. So, how do you forge alliances when your very existence challenges the established order? The first step, as Oberyn Martell constantly reminded him, was to understand the motivations of those you seek to court. Dorne, driven by centuries of resentment towards the Lannisters, was a relatively easy sell. But what about others? The Iron Islands, ruled by the perpetually disgruntled Balon Greyjoy, remained a volatile wildcard. Sending Theon, despite his proven loyalty, was deemed too risky. As Oberyn shrewdly observed, Balon was more likely to see Theon as a hostage than a son. Instead, a carefully worded letter promising Theon's return upon the first Ironborn raid against Lannisport was dispatched. It was a gamble, a calculated risk designed to exploit Balon's insatiable hunger for revenge. Meanwhile, Catelyn Stark, ever the pragmatist, was dispatched to the Vale, seeking the support of her sister, Lysa Arryn, and the formidable knights of the Vale. The Vale, untouched by the ravages of war, possessed a significant military force. Securing their allegiance could provide a crucial advantage. However, Lysa's notoriously erratic behavior and her unwavering devotion to her son, Robert Arryn, made negotiations difficult to say the least. We all know how that turned out. While political maneuvering unfolded, Robb, the young wolf, continued his campaign in the Westerlands, drawing Tywin Lannister away from Harrenhal. This provided Jon with the opportunity to consolidate his control over the Riverlands, liberating castles and earning the loyalty of the Riverlords. Jon, guided by Oberyn's astute counsel, focused on rebuilding villages, burying the dead, and ensuring that justice, however swift and harsh, was served. Music becomes slightly more hopeful. One particularly significant victory came at Derry, where Jon and Oberyn confronted a raiding party led by the Mountain himself. The battle, though fierce and brutal, resulted in a decisive victory for Jon, bolstering his reputation and further solidifying his claim as a leader worthy of respect. Oberyn's combat prowess in the skirmish was brutal and efficient. Gone was the collected man as he dealt with his enemies swiftly with a spear and dagger, moving like a whirlwind to dispatch his foes. Not only was the Viper adept on the battleground, but he gave Jon a lesson in politics on the battlefield. As well, the people are excited by this success, my friend, Oberyn observed as they surveyed the aftermath of the battle. A few more victories like that, and the Lannisters might take your claim more seriously. With a few more victories like that, we might hopefully be able to win the war, Jon replied, his voice tinged with weariness. Not without allies. Dorne is ready to march, but against whom? The Baratheons? We lack the ships to transport an entire army. Although I am building strength in Maidenpool, but it will take time. Oberyn stroked his chin thoughtfully. In the meantime, we must consider the possibility of reaching out to allies further away. Who is left? We certainly can't. Trust the Ironborn, Jon said. Oberyn chuckled. I mean beyond Westeros, my friend. The dragons still live in exile. We might have a chance of convincing her to join us. Daenerys Targaryen. You're referring to her, aren't you? Jon asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. But she is a runaway without an army. The last I heard, her husband died, and his Khalasar is fractured. Those who remain number a few hundred at most. Oberyn shrugged. Still, you must ask yourself how she was able to survive for so long. Her husband only protected her for a year, but she survived 13 on Essos. That means someone had to watch over her or be her allies. It is worth thinking about. And if not, at the very least, you should be able to present a unified front. And so, whispers of the White Dragon's rise reached Daenerys Targaryen across the narrow sea, in the opulent city of Korth. Initially skeptical, Daenerys found herself increasingly intrigued by the prospect of a nephew, a Targaryen claimant in Westeros, fighting for the Iron Throne. The news stirred something deep within her, a longing for family, a desire to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Maester Illyrio Mopatis, her longtime benefactor, urged her to return to Pentos, where he had been assembling a force to support her claim. Daenerys, however, was hesitant. She remembered the betrayals and broken promises she had endured in the past. How could she be certain that this nephew was legitimate? How could she trust the loyalty of an army bought and paid for by Illyrio's coin? How can we be certain this nephew of yours is truly even legitimate? She asked, her voice laced with suspicion. I have heard more true tales from a brothel than this, a lost son of Rhaegar. Rather convenient, is it not? And how it happens to leave him ahead in succession. Ser Jorah Mormont, her trusted advisor, spoke with conviction. I've heard of Ned Stark. He's an honest man who has never lied about a thing in his life. If the letters are written in his words, then I shall believe it is true. Ultimately, Daenerys made her decision. She would not allow this potential ally, this family connection, to slip through her fingers. If I remain here, he may steal this throne from beneath me, she declared. No, I shall meet my nephew. A fleet was prepared, and Daenerys sailed back to Pentos, where she was greeted by a formidable army, a motley collection of mercenaries, sellswords, and exiles, all united by the promise of gold and the hope of conquest. Back in the Riverlands, as Tywin Lannister marched his forces towards River Run, Jon and Robb prepared to meet him in battle. Their strategy, however, was not to engage in a direct confrontation, but rather to lure Tywin into a trap. The Riverlords, under Edmure Tully's command, were instructed to give ground, to feign weakness, and to allow Tywin to believe that victory was within his grasp. This strategy proved successful. Tywin, blinded by ambition and a desire to crush, the rebellion pursued the retreating Riverlanders, unaware that Oberyn Martell and a contingent of Dornish spears were waiting in ambush. The Dornish struck with swift and deadly precision, decimating Tywin's rearguard and forcing him to retreat with heavy losses. While Tywin escaped the trap, the damage had been done. He was weakened, demoralized, and, most importantly, unable to intervene in the events unfolding in King's Landing. Meanwhile, Stannis Baratheon, having consolidated his power in the Stormlands, launched a daring attack on King's Landing. The city, weakened by war and internal strife, fell to Stannis's forces, who claimed the Iron Throne in the name of justice and righteousness. Stannis immediately reiterated his stance, calling Jon a traitor. Efforts to reach out to him were in vain, and their initial probing attacks failed. But this left Dorne in a dangerous position. Even with his victories, Stannis enjoyed complete naval superiority. This allowed him to move troops faster than Robb or Jon each time an attack was launched. It was during this turbulent period that Daenerys Targaryen, with her army and her dragons, finally arrived in Westeros. Her fleet landed in the Riverlands, sending ripples of excitement and trepidation throughout the land. The Riverlords, Dornishmen, and Northmen stared in awe as the Dothraki warriors disembarked from the ships. Their exotic clothing, fearsome weapons, and unwavering loyalty to their queen, a stark contrast to the hardened veterans of Westeros. But it was the dragons, of course, that truly captured their attention. The first dragons seen in Westeros for over a century. These magnificent creatures, though still small, radiated an aura of power and majesty, a symbol of a dynasty reborn. And so, Daenerys Targaryen, the Dragon Queen, finally met Jon Snow, the White Dragon. As they gazed upon each other, a sense of destiny hung in the air, the promise of a powerful alliance, but also the potential for conflict and rivalry. The game was about to change. So where do these houses that have been at war and on different sides of the world for so long now meet? Is a marriage and alliance truly enough to set the past in the past And how will Stannis react to these new developments? Only time will tell. Okay, here we go. The dragon and the wolf, a united front and a throne, forged in peace, or not. The celebrations are short-lived, folks. Winning the war is one thing, keeping the peace, that's a whole different beast. Imagine trying to herd cats, wearing full-plate armor, in a hurricane. That's pretty much what Jon's about to face. See, even with Stannis out of the picture and Aegon, well, permanently out of the picture, cracks are already starting to show in this hard-won alliance. The stakes, the very future of Westeros itself. Will this new kingdom descend into further chaos, or can Jon forge a lasting peace? Now, the biggest immediate problem isn't some external threat. It's the internal squabbles. We're talking about a Northman who still doesn't quite trust those fancy Dornishmen. We're talking river lords who are eyeing Daenerys' dragons with a healthy dose of suspicion. And of course, we have the ever-present political maneuvering, with lords vying for influence and positions of power. Stannis, even in death, manages to stir the pot. Before his final charge, he'd sent out ravens, whispers on the wind, sowing seeds of discord. His message? Simple. Daenerys is a foreign invader, a dragon queen who will turn Westeros into another Essos. And frankly, a few folks are listening, especially those who lost family fighting for Robert Baratheon all those years ago. The pain is still raw for some. And then there's the other Targaryen angle. While Aegon, the maybe real, maybe fake, bit the dust in King's Landing, the whispers persist. Targaryens are mad, incestuous, fire and blood. It's a tough image to shake, even with Jon being about as unmad as you can get. He's basically Westeros' Mr. Rogers, but with a direwolf and a claim to the Iron Throne. This simmering tension finally boils over when a small council meeting turns into a full-blown shouting match. It starts with a debate about land distribution. The Riverlands are still devastated from the war, and everyone's angling for a piece of the pie. Then it escalates into a broader argument about Daenerys' influence. We can't just hand over control of the Riverlands to foreign sellswords. Edmure Tully bellows, his face red with anger. Daenerys, never one to back down, fires back. My sellswords helped win you back your home, Lord Tully. Show some gratitude. Robb tries to mediate, but the damage is done. The meeting ends with everyone storming out, leaving Jon staring at a table littered with maps and half-empty wine goblets. Peace looks a long way off. The tension continues to rise. It manifests as small insults, suspicious glances, and closed-door meetings. The alliance is fracturing. Seeing an opportunity, a few loyalists of Stannis Baratheon in the Stormlands, still clinging to hope, decide to make a move, their goal, to destabilize the newly formed kingdom and possibly, just possibly, restore a Baratheon to the throne. These guys are nothing if not persistent. Their plan is audacious: kidnap Daenerys. Without her, they believe the alliance will collapse. No dragons, no foreign army, just the bickering lords of Westeros left to fight among themselves. It's a risky gamble, but they're desperate. They manage to infiltrate River Run through a network of disgruntled servants and former Lannister sympathizers. Yes, they're still out there. One dark night, a small group of assassins slips into Daenerys' chambers. They're quickly subdued by Barristan Selmy and Strong Belwas, but not before they manage to drug Daenerys, rendering her unconscious. When Jon discovers Daenerys is missing, chaos erupts. Accusations fly left and right. Some blame the Tyrells, others suspect the Dornish. Nobody knows who to trust. The Northmen, ever suspicious of outsiders, immediately point fingers at the foreign contingent. Jon, however, remains surprisingly calm. He knows that panic will only make things worse. He gathers his advisors and lays out a plan. They need to find Daenerys, and they need to do it fast. But they also need to prevent the alliance from falling apart completely. The stakes are incredibly high. We can't let this divide us. Jon says, his voice firm. Whoever took Daenerys wants exactly that. We need to show them that we're stronger together, not weaker. The search begins. Robb takes command of the northern troops, securing River Run and preventing any further infiltration. Oberyn uses his network of spies to gather information, scouring the riverlands for any leads. Jon, meanwhile, decides to take a more proactive approach. He knows that Stannis' loyalists are likely behind this, and he knows where to find them, the Stormlands. Against the advice of his council, Jon decides to lead a small elite team into the Stormlands himself. He's accompanied by Ghost, Ser Barristan, Selmy, and a handful of trusted Northmen. They ride hard and fast, cutting through the countryside, determined to rescue Daenerys. The journey is fraught with danger. They face ambushes, hostile locals, and the ever-present threat of Stannis' remaining forces. But Jon is driven by a fierce determination. He feels responsible for Daenerys' safety. He knows that if anything happens to her, the alliance will crumble and Westeros will descend into chaos once again. After days of relentless searching, they finally get a break. A farmer, terrified of the rumors spreading through the region, tells them of a group of armed men who've been seen transporting a veiled woman through the woods. The farmer points them towards an abandoned castle, an old Baratheon stronghold, now rumored to be haunted. Jon and his team approach the castle cautiously. It's dark and foreboding, the stone walls crumbling with age. The air is thick with the smell of mildew and decay. As they get closer, they hear voices. "She's awake," one voice says, "but she's still weak." "Good," another voice replies. "We'll deliver her to the Iron Throne as soon as possible. Stannis would have been so proud," Jon signals to his men. It's time. They storm the castle, swords drawn, Ghost leading the charge. The Stannis loyalists are caught completely off guard. A fierce battle ensues. Steel clashes against steel, the air filled with the sounds of grunts and screams. Barristan Selmy, despite his age, fights with the skill and ferocity of a young man. Ghost tears through the enemy ranks, his fangs bared, his eyes glowing in the darkness. Jon fights his way through the castle, searching for Daenerys. He finds her locked in a small, damp chamber. She's pale and weak, but alive. "Jon," she whispers, her voice barely audible. "I'm here," he says, unlocking the door. "We're getting you out of here." As they escape the castle, they're confronted by the leader of the Stannis loyalists, a grizzled knight with a burning hatred in his eyes. "You can't stop us," the knight snarls. "Stannis' vision will prevail." Jon steps forward, his sword held high. "Stannis is dead," he says, his voice cold. "His vision died with him. Now, this ends." A final duel ensues. The knight is a skilled warrior, but Jon is fueled by adrenaline and a burning desire to protect Daenerys. He fights with a ferocity that surprises even himself. Finally, he manages to disarm the knight, knocking his sword to the ground. He hesitates for a moment, looking down at the defeated knight. He could kill him, end the threat once and for all. But he remembers his father's words. "The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword." And Jon is no executioner. "Take him prisoner," Jon orders. "He'll face justice in King's Landing." With Daenerys rescued and the Stannis loyalists defeated, Jon and his team return to River Run. The alliance is shaken, but it's still intact. Jon's willingness to risk his own life to save Daenerys has earned him the respect of many, including Daenerys herself. The incident reinforces the importance of loyalty and trust. It reminds everyone that they're all in this together, fighting for a common goal. And it sets the stage for the final, decisive battle. The forces of the North, the Riverlands, Dawn, and the Reach converge on King's Landing. They outnumber the remaining Baratheon forces, but they know that victory is not guaranteed. The Golden Company is still a formidable force, and the city is heavily fortified. Jon and Daenerys decide to launch a two-pronged attack. Jon will lead, the main assault on the city gates, while Daenerys, riding Drogon, who is getting big now, will attack from the air, targeting the city's defenses. The battle is long and brutal. The Northmen, fueled by their hatred of the Lannisters and their loyalty to Jon, fight with unmatched ferocity. The Dornish, seeking vengeance for Elia Martell, are equally relentless. The Reachmen, eager to prove their worth, throw themselves into the fray. Daenerys and Drogon rain fire down on the city, destroying siege weapons and scattering enemy soldiers. But the Golden Company stands firm, their ranks unbroken. They're disciplined, well-equipped, and determined to defend the city. The battle rages for hours, the outcome uncertain. Then, a turning point. A group of Northmen, led by Grey Worm, who is now fiercely loyal to Jon after the rescue, manage to breach the city gates. They pour into King's Landing, engaging the Golden Company in street-to-street combat. The fighting is intense. The narrow streets of the city are filled with the sounds of clashing steel, screams, and the roar of Drogon overhead. But the Northmen, driven by their determination, slowly gain ground. Finally, after hours of fighting, the Golden Company is routed. Their leader, a Targaryen bastard and last hope of House Blackfyre, is killed. The remaining Baratheon forces surrender. King's Landing is taken. Jon, covered in blood and grime, stands before the Iron Throne. He looks out at the city, the smoke rising from the burning buildings, the bodies lying in the streets. He knows that the war is over, but the real work is just beginning. He ascends the Iron Throne, but he does not sit comfortably. He knows that the throne is a symbol of power, but it's also a symbol of pain, of suffering, of broken promises. He addresses the gathered lords and ladies, his voice echoing through the hall. "The war is over," he says, "but the healing must begin. We must rebuild this city, this kingdom. We must create a new Westeros, a Westeros where justice and mercy prevail." He declares a general amnesty, pardoning all those who fought against him, with the exception of a select few who committed egregious crimes. He promises to listen to the needs of his people, to rule with fairness and compassion. And then he makes a controversial decision. He decides to dismantle the Iron Throne. "This throne is a symbol of everything that's wrong with Westeros," he says. "It's a symbol of conquest, of oppression, of endless war. We don't need it anymore." He orders the throne to be melted down and used to forge new tools, new weapons, new symbols of peace and prosperity. Jon Snow, the White Dragon, ascends the Iron Throne. He chooses forgiveness over vengeance, unity over division, and hope over despair. But the path ahead is not easy. Instability remains high. The lords of Westeros are still ambitious, still prone to infighting. The memory of the war is still fresh in everyone's minds. And then there's the wild card, Daenerys' own ambitions. She's loyal to Jon for now, but she's also a Targaryen with a burning desire to rule. The question is, will she be content with being Jon's advisor, or will she eventually seek the throne for herself? The seeds of future conflict are sown. The Game of Thrones is far from over. It's just entered a new, unpredictable phase. Will Jon's choices usher in an era of lasting peace, or will Westeros descend into chaos once more? Only time will tell. And that, my friends, is a story for another time.